Welcome to this brief introduction of movers and shakers who impact our region and world. Some people call them rainmakers. Philanthropy has been a part of life on Earth for thousands of years, but only recently has philanthropy become a strategic part of business outreach. If there was ever a time, now is the time for all good companies to come to the aid of their communities. Over the next few minutes, representatives discuss their collaborations to create truly sustainable communities.
RDI partners with developing countries around the world to help design, change, and implement land laws that provide land ownership opportunities for the world's poorest people. We work at the structural level because we find that the legal and the policy framework often discriminates against the poor, that they have a very difficult time accessing land ownership, and in fact, throughout most of the world, the poorest people live in rural areas. 75% of the world's poorest people live in rural areas where land is the most important source of food, of income, of nutrition, of wealth, status, power, access to credit. So land equals opportunity for most of the world's poor, but many of them are poor because they don't have access to land. Providing a way for them to access land and get ownership to land is fundamentally important.
So you're an independent nonprofit. You're not part of the State Department, are you?
We are not.
So how can you, an organization based here in the Seattle area, have an impact in a developing country somewhere else on their laws?
It's all about partnerships, and it's all about partnerships, in our case, private-public partnerships with developing country governments. We partner with other groups as well, but our primary partners are developing country governments. We cannot ourselves provide land rights. We cannot ourselves change the laws in developing countries. What we are doing is providing information, research findings, technical assistance, and then advocacy to try to get the developing country governments to change things.
What other benefits are there to land ownership in a developing country?
So at the family level, land ownership or secure land rights to a piece of land leads to higher productivity, well documented, leads to better nutrition for the children and for the family as a whole, leads to much more investment in the land. As you can imagine, if you own land rather than when you don't own it, you're willing to invest it and make the kind of long-term productivity-enhancing investments. But it also gives people access to credit, gives people status within their community, which is very, very important to them. In fact, when we ask about all these different types of benefits I'm mentioning, when we do interviews at the grassroots and ask people who have gotten land ownership, which of these is the most important, the status and kind of recognition within the society, the dignity aspect to it is often the most important. It leads them to have the confidence to engage in local politics, in local kind of market transactions. It's transformative. One success story, in India, we started a project in India in 2000. We started with this research phase that I told you about, listening to people on the ground, particularly the poor, but also in the government, to understand what efforts had already been made and what had been successful and what hasn't. What we learned was, one, landlessness was by far the best predictor of poverty in this country. Two, that in the period after independence, India had tried to address this problem and had largely failed. And they had tried to address it based on an assumption that they had to give multiple acres of land to every landless family to make a meaningful difference for that family. What our further research showed was they didn't need to give 5 acres per family, that they could do it on a fraction of an acre, as small as 1/10 of an acre, which all of a sudden made it much more feasible from a political standpoint, from a financial standpoint. And working together with the government, we got them to adopt that micro land ownership approach in the key policy document for the country that the government of India passes. And 4 states have now started programs that are providing these microplots of land to landless women and their families in India. Women in developing countries and everywhere are incredible agents of social and economic change. Women now produce the bulk of the world's food, yet own less than 5% of the land. And what we know from research is that when assets get into women's hands, when women have more say over the control of how the income is spent from those assets, that families, children are better served. We know that when women get empowered, that a multitude of good things happen, and making sure that women have rights, legal rights to the most important assets, which in most cases is land, but it can include other things too, helps protect women, helps empower them, and helps to make them more productive.